Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Cruz. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy to have you on the podcast. We're going to talk about a unique subject today, which means, and first of all, I'm going to introduce you, and then I'm going to describe more what we're going to be talking about. So you are a professional speaker. You are a speaker coach for leaders, and you create events and empower your clients to grow their businesses from speaking on stages.
That is right.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today about how speaking on stages actually empower you as a leader and how you can use it as part of your business development strategy. But first, tell us more about yourself. How did you get started and how did you end up with this line of work?
Yeah, well, I knew that I was meant for more. And after going through some losses in my life, I learned that the only way to really heal for this is being able to share my story. And every time I shared my story, I would heal a little bit more. And then I got to the place where I said, I want to help other people do the same thing. And so after writing multiple best-selling books and speaking on several stages, I decided that I also wanted to coach leaders on how they can become more effective communicators so they can lead their organization and grow their business through speaking.
Right. So in your opinion, what's the importance of knowing how to tell your story? What impact does it actually create for leaders?
Yeah, so a story is just designed as a way to connect with your audience. And it's much easier to really lead someone if they understand you and if they've built trust. And a well told story is one of the greatest ways to build trust with your audience, creates authentic, meaningful connections, and it really shows that you're a person just like them who've gone through similar challenges, and you can inspire hope in somebody else to do the same thing.
I agree. So can you tell us your story?
Yeah, well, my wife and I, we were praying for a child for years and it didn't happen. And then we were blessed with a baby girl. And when she was born, she was 4 months early. And when you're 4 months early, you have a lot of health challenges. And so when she was born, she was only 1 pound and could literally fit in the palm of my hand. That's how little she was. And every single day in the hospital, we never knew what would happen next. And then 42 days of her fighting for her life, she passed away. And worst day of my life. And what got me through it is my faith and my family, but then also sharing my story. I began to write, I began to speak because that was helping me heal this broken part in my heart. And I saw how it was helping me. And I said, I know if it can help me, I know it can help others. And so that's been my mission going forward, is to help people to feel empowered and heal and grow again and to find their purpose through their story.
Wow. Definitely gave me goosebumps when you were telling the story. It's definitely very emotionally connected, right? I mean, people can connect emotionally to you when they hear the story because you become real to them. You become human, not just a name or a coach or somebody who is trying to sell them something. Yes, I can see that.
Mm-hmm. And so that's what got me started on this journey.
So if you have a leader that they have some trepidations of being that vulnerable or opening up like that, how do you coach them? What do you say?
Yeah, so I've worked with hundreds of leaders, all different backgrounds, when it comes to sharing their story and speaking. And some people are maybe more cautious with sharing the vulnerable parts of their story. And so you might not have to be able to share the most vulnerable part of your story, but how about you share maybe a part that was maybe less vulnerable? So, for example, if someone loses a loved one, like, a sibling that they love dearly passes away, and that's a huge part of their story. Maybe they're not in a position to talk about losing that loved one yet. However, there's different parts of their life where they could still be vulnerable and connect with their audience. Maybe there was a time when they were in school and the teacher said, "You'll never amount to anything and you'll never be smart enough." And that really hurt them deeply. And so they could start with maybe something more like that. So you don't always have to start with the most painful story. You can find other parts of your life where it was a challenge and a struggle that you overcame and worked through. And so you don't always have to go to the deepest part, but you can lead them there eventually as you heal more. But I think it's important to find at least a challenge that you faced in your life where you can feel like your audience can connect with you.
Absolutely. What are, in your opinion, the most important parts of a story, a well-written story? What are the most important parts?
I'll break down a few parts of the story framework. Is one, you got to have a character. And this character, you want to make this character likable, but this character also faces a conflict. And during that conflict, they're stuck and they have a coach who shows up and guides them to the next steps, which leads to a conclusion. So, a character, they have a conflict, they have a coach or a mentor, and then there's a conclusion. And if you can structure the story effectively, it's going to be a much smoother process to communicate your message through storytelling.
Absolutely. So when you coach leaders to speak on stage, is it just speaking about their story or is it speaking about the area of expertise? What do you coach them on?
Yep. So it's going to depend on the needs of that particular individual. For some people, it's like they want to share their story, which is we have programs for that. And then there's also for people like they want to showcase their expertise and thought leadership. And so I believe the most effective speaking actually blends both. So I can do one or the other, but both I believe is the best because when you tell your story, you build the trust and the connection between your audience. And then when you're able to showcase your expertise, it lets people know that you're also a leader in a particular space and they could potentially hire you to help them. And so you want to make sure that you can blend both effectively. And I believe the best speakers in the world find a way to share their story and also showcase their expertise in the same presentation.
I agree. So when you showcase your expertise, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you recommend to your clients? What are some of the tips that you can give the audience to show, like, how do you build a good speech that shows your expertise and shows that you are a thought leader?
Well, it's a few things. One is don't use big words and language that's industry specific a lot of the times to an audience that does not relate. So, if you're in a room full of people in your industry, you can maybe use some of the industry language. That's okay. But if you're in a room where people don't fully understand the industry, but you could still serve them, you want to use the simplest language as possible. Sometimes speakers will get in front of a room and they'll use big, long words to sound smart, to sound like look how intelligent I am, look how much I've studied and look how much I've learned. And when you actually use bigger words, you make less impact. And it's actually the simpler the language, the easier it is for your audience to connect. So the don'ts are don't use big, complicated, long words because most people don't talk that way. Always simplify your expertise. That way it shows them that this is not going to be something that's extremely complicated to get a desired result.
That's right. What are other tips? That's a very good point. What other components exist in order to create a good speech when you want to showcase your thought leadership?
You want to have a process. When I work with my speakers, there's typically a few different ways to go about it. I usually say have a 3-step process. You can have 5, you can have 7, you can have 2. I believe threes, the brain can process threes a little bit simpler. So an ABC formula, you can call it whatever you want, but have something that's easy and memorable for your audience. 3 simple steps that they can write down, that they can possibly remember and recall to. So if you have a 3-step process, that makes it so much easier for your audience to digest the content.
Good. So let's talk about this. This is the System Simplified. We are all about creating processes for our clients. So I love, and that's exactly, you did your homework, so that's fabulous for you to mention it. Let's build the 3-step process. What is the 3-step process?
Yeah, so the 3-step process is going to depend on that specific person's target demographic. And so when I'm working with someone and they're explaining their industry, they're explaining their leadership, they're going to break down the most important steps that their audience needs. So everyone is going to be different, but as long as you can commit to a process, you want to research the process, you want to test that process, you want to implement that process, and then you want to be able to see if you can run your clients through that process and get them wins.
So like an example for us, we like our process is that we design, we create and document, we optimize, and we implement. That's the process. So when I'm doing, let's say you were coaching me and I was going to do a speech on for my thought leadership to show the audience that I know what I'm talking about, I know how to create processes, I will talk about that process, and it's going to be in simple language that people can understand.
Absolutely. And then in addition to that, bonus is have social proof within that presentation. So for example, if you had a client that you helped through your specific process, you actually want to use their name, their face, and then a brief description on how your process helped them get the desired results. And the more of those that you use in your thought leadership and in your presentation, the more credibility and social proof that you will have, which will make it easier for someone to want to work with you.
Absolutely. And that's part of the story, right? You are creating the story about the successes. You are created, let's say I helped Chris. Okay, good. How did I help Chris? And I tell that story. So that creates that connection.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very good. At what point of the entrepreneurial journey should an entrepreneur consider to go on stage and tell their story or establish themselves as a thought leader?
Well, I'll say this. If they're going to share their story, one thing I would say is make sure that you've healed from your story before you get on that stage. And so a lot of times speakers will utilize this stage as a place to trauma dump and talk about all their pain and all their problems. And so there's nothing wrong with talking about your pain and your problems. Just don't be still living in the middle of it. Like heal from it first and then share. But as far as getting on the stage in general, as soon as humanly possible, preferably with a speaker coach who showed you the right frameworks. But the sooner you start getting on stages, the more exposure, the more credibility, the more expertise you can establish, and the better you'll get at your speaking, because it's going to take repetition. And if you have a speaker coach guiding you, like when I'm working with my clients, it's like, we're going to go through their entire talk, help them build the talk. They give their entire talk to me, and then I give them feedback. We rearrange the whole talk. When it's time for them to be on stage, they're so confident because they have clarity.
Absolutely. Jesse, if people want to learn more about what you do, they want to contact you, our listeners want to reach out to you, to ask you questions, to want to work with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best way to connect with me is right on Facebook, Jesse Cruz. Feel free to just send me a message or a friend request. Love to see how I can help.
Okay, great. And we'll include it in the show notes. Well, Jesse, it's been great having you on this podcast and discuss this subject, which I think is very important. It is a great way to generate interest, improve your brand, create a brand, create new interest in somebody's business that is sometimes overlooked, but it's very, very important. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and expertise.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.